You think that as soon as you become remote entrepreneur, like the world is yours. You are free as a butterfly. But I would like to propose
Good. Please
um,
do.
a different angle to this. I find myself more busy and working more as an entrepreneur than as an employee.
Are you ready? All right. Welcome to the Remote Work and Travel Show. I'm your host, Nora Dunn, and I'm otherwise known as the Professional Hobo. And in this series, I speak with people who have travel lifestyles and remote careers to get the real dirt on what it's like to travel long-term and work remotely. If you haven't already received your free checklist of 10 things to do before you travel long-term, you will find a link for that free checklist in the show notes. And I encourage you to download it so you can start traveling long-term way better than I did back in 2006. Now, my guest today is Victoria Puzach. Victoria was born and raised in a Russian exclave, and she traveled abroad for the first time when she was 6 years old, and she never stopped. She has visited 56 countries, she's lived in 16 of them, and she's been enjoying a fully location-independent lifestyle and remote work for the past 3 years while picking up a new active hobby, kite surfing. Her professional background is in EdTech and Events Organization. She has produced and launched e-learning programs. She ran international expansion for the company Mindvalley, which serves 12 million students. She's organized international festivals, personal growth events, and co-living houses around the world. On her entrepreneurial journey these days, she's creating virtual events and programs, tackling the challenges of remote workers, freelancers, and entrepreneurs who want to take advantage of the changing global landscape, have more freedom, exploration, focus, and deep connections in their lives. She's the founder of the Work Travel Summit, InFocus, and co-founder of CoLife Homes. And I'm very grateful to have met you, Victoria. We first connected when you were doing the Work Travel Summit, which was an amazing 4-day event for remote workers. You really pulled it out with some amazing stuff, and I was so honored to be able to host the second day of that summit. Welcome to the show, Victoria.
Thanks, Nora. Thanks for being with us, Dan, and thanks for inviting me for the show. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm really excited because you've done a lot of different kinds of remote work. So you've been a remote employee, you've been a remote entrepreneur, you've worked for large organizations and small. And I'm really intrigued. Not only are you an expert on remote work and the global landscape, but also I think your personal experience really lends itself well to this conversation. So perhaps we can start off and you can tell me a little bit about your remote work journey and how you evolved from Mindvalley to what you're doing now.
So I think I want to start a little background. So as you said, I was born in Russia. I grew up there. I graduated in international relations and applied informatics, which I think perfectly describes my nature of going multi-passionate and being a generalist in everything I do. So that led me to run events, organize different online programs, and do product launches for the company like Mindvalley. So that's when I moved to Malaysia, to Kuala Lumpur, when I was 23, 22 years old, like right after my university. And because the company was remote friendly, which let's distinguish it from being like fully remote. They were remote friendly because there were lots of international employees. And of course, they allowed them to go visit home, to go travel for a few weeks. And I enjoyed it a lot. So that's how Malaysia opened up for me the whole Southeast Asia as a territory, amazing countries from Thailand to India to Bali, Indonesia. So all these popular nomad destinations were right there for me. But every time I had to come back to my Kuala Lumpur office and to my Kuala Lumpur apartment, which was stunning, and it was definitely an upgrade after living in Russia. But I felt like it wasn't enough. I always wanted to have this feeling of one-way ticket and don't think about going back home or whatever, like reinventing what home could mean for me. So that's when I came to my manager, and at that point I was already leading 20 or so people team. So we were hybrid. Some people were working in Estonian office, some people were working in Malaysian office, but there were no president before for team managers to be fully remote in the company. So I went to my manager. I remember this day very vividly because I was so nervous because I was about to pop a question, a question about me going fully remote because I wanted to go beyond Malaysia. I wanted to travel. I wanted to experience being nomadic. And I enter our office. I go to this room and I ask her, Chris, that's her name. I'm like, I want to be full remote. And I always had this dream of traveling the world. Can I do this? Will you let me go and be full remote? And she asked me only one question back. She asks if I can do this, if I think I can manage this. And I said, like, yeah, sure, I think I can do it. And she's like, okay, sure, go. And I'm like, what? Was it that easy? It
That
was
was
the only
easy.
thing I just had to ask. So yeah, that's how I switched to be full remote team manager. So and the next 2 years I spent managing my remote team. And likely, like a year after I started this experience, COVID came. So we all kind of evened up, and everybody became remote. So that was a good time. I'm glad I experienced a little bit of what being remote and travel actively looked like for me at that point. And last year, like about a year ago, I felt like I'm done with the employment. I just had this feeling and inner confidence that, okay, I don't want to be employed anymore. I always wanted to try something my own. So that was the moment when I'm like, okay, I'm ready to quit. I don't know yet what I'm gonna do, but I'm ready to quit and take a break. So to take a break and just like figure out what I want to do next, and that's how I transitioned to remote entrepreneurship. So I'm consulting online educational products and programs. So I'm helping them with marketing and growth hacking, but also this year I've started the idea of Work Travel Summit, which now develops into more projects, into more programs for freelancers, entrepreneurs, and those who want to work remotely and have this freedom and to have more fulfilling lives. That's a long story shortly. I don't know how short that was though.
No, I'm all good. I like long stories. And that was a great story. And I'm curious about that transition, though, that transition from being a remote employee to a remote entrepreneur. You said you took that leap without having anything set up. And I'm curious, in order to make that leap, in order to quit your job and go into the entrepreneurial life without necessarily having that safety net build up, how did you prepare for this financially and otherwise?
Yeah, that's a great question because it wasn't just me deciding to quit one day and doing that because I think it's too risky. I love traveling, I love risks, but not in this sense because I think we still need to. Oh, at that point I felt like, okay, I'm ready to quit, but also because I did make some savings and I did plan ahead. So okay, I should have at least 1 year of safety net, so if nothing happens, no projects are up, no money is made, I'll still gonna be safe and can continue with my lifestyle. So that's important. And whoever is thinking maybe of taking the same leap, I would definitely advise to consider, okay, calculate, look at your expenses. But also, if you never traveled yet as a nomad and at the same time you want to start your business, I would think twice about that because sometimes travel could be a little more expensive than you imagine if you do it full time, or it could be actually cheaper. It depends on where you're coming from. And I think, Nora, you have wonderful tons of materials on how to travel cheaper and how to break through this limitation that it's only expensive. So yeah, definitely calculate and definitely make sure the safety net is there.
All right. Well, you bring up a great point about, okay, so you made sure that you had 1 year's expenses. And by that point, you had enough travel experience to be able to estimate, given your lifestyle, what that would be. And certainly the big surprise for me when I started traveling full time was that actually the cost to travel full time was a lot less than I had expected it to be. But that was for a few different reasons, because of course you can spend as much on travel as you want.
Yeah.
But I did find that it actually didn't cost as much because, of course, I wasn't in vacation mode, I was in work mode. So instead of staying in hotels, I was staying in apartments or places that could be rented for a few months at a time. Or, as I did for most of the first 10 years that I was traveling full time, I got my accommodation for free with activities like volunteering and house sitting. So, I mean, I was able to
Oh, wow.
dramatically I actually saved over $100,000 on accommodation in my first 10 years abroad. And
That's
that was,
impressive. Wow.
I know, right? When I did the math, I was
Okay,
like,
I did
oh
not do
man.
this, but like, why did I not do this? Okay, I know why I did.
Well, all right. So this begs the question then. By that point, you did have a little bit of experience. I'm curious what your cost to travel full time, what your cost to be a nomad is on average.
hmm that's a really good question, and I have to give a disclaimer here. So because if we're talking about solo travel, it's one story, right? But I'm traveling together with my partner, so we do have our expenses shared, which in my view, like, helps the budget, because obviously you don't need to rent and pay for everything yourself. You can share your rent, you can share the car rentals, you can share certain expenses which otherwise I would be paying myself. So considering that it's two of us, it makes it easier. And my partner was also very encouraging in this case for, okay, quit your job, don't worry, even if your savings are over, like, we'll figure it out, we'll find the way. So that was also kind of like, it felt good, so it
Yeah.
felt more, I felt more brave to definitely take this leap. But again, depends on the country. And I think that you mentioned like your travel expenses were less than, for example, in the US, right? Because you're coming from the US economy, where prices are way higher than, let's say, Southeast Asia or Latin America. I was coming from Russian plus Malaysian background, where the cost of living is very cheap,
Mhm.
especially comparing to like Northern America and Western Europe. So I would say in my case, my expenses actually increased when I started traveling and living on the road. So that's why I want to bring this perspective that it's not only goes the way to lower it down, it could also go up. So I was ready for this, because if let's say I could spend on rental in Malaysia, I was always living in shared apartments with my friend, so I was spending something like $400 on my accommodation on a room, and I'm taking this very like an average way. So when I started traveling, like my shared expense for the accommodation actually grew, because we were, as you know, like staying like maybe short term, or choosing to stay in like in nicer places, because there were two of us and the budget was higher. So that's where I would give an estimate. So like my shared portion for the accommodation grew up to like $500 to $600, let's say, or even more sometimes. And same about the food. So the food is definitely more expensive in Europe and Northern America than in Malaysia. So that's another thing I considered and I planned for, but it's also important to know.
Well, this is smart because what I'm hearing is you overestimated in some cases your expenses. So you made sure that you had that buffer. You weren't just lowballing yourself and calculating how much money you would need to live for a year, but instead you gave yourself the option of being able to, for example, eat out in Europe, and to
Yeah.
be able to travel and live in places that are not just $5 a day places, which is, I think, a really good plan for a variety of reasons. And certainly as a former financial planner, I'm all about overestimating so we don't end up in a pickle. But I think there's one other element that you may or may not have planned for, and I'm curious to see if you did plan for it in going out on your own as an entrepreneur, and that is seed money or start money for your business. So I don't know if you found yourself having to take online courses to brush up your skills, or if there was an investment in programs and technology, and what has the startup costs been for your various ventures, and how did you plan for that?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. That's a great question. I definitely planned for this, and I did allocate, um, I would say maybe 10% of my savings towards this starting position, because I knew I'll be running, okay, at the same time, I'll be running like marketing consultancy and I'll have some money coming in. Or if I wouldn't, so I'll definitely have money to spend on, as you said, courses. And I was building the website for my project, right? So like I will need to hire freelancers, I need to hire team members to help me manage the events, to help me manage the certain aspects of this whole online programs management. So I did plan about 10% of my savings for that.
Where I forget, this is, I think, an important question for a lot of people who might already be working remotely, but are considering starting their own businesses and going off on their own. What are some of the differences between being a remote employee and a remote entrepreneur? And you can talk about both advantages and challenges.
Thanks for the question. And first of all, thank you for doing this in 2006, because I think because of people like you, those like leaders and founders of this movement, we all know this. So thanks
The
for sharing your
unwitting
experience
pioneer.
from
I had
many years.
no idea.
Exactly, exactly. So back to your question, the biggest difference is freedom. But I would like to elaborate on this because it might sound unexpectedly, because you think that as soon as you become remote entrepreneur, like the world is yours, you are free as a butterfly. But I would like to propose a different
Good. Please
um,
do.
a different angle to this, because of course you become more free. You don't have your strict schedule, you don't have the hours you have to be on Zoom or in front of a camera or your laptop to deliver certain aspects of your work. So you are more free to choose what you do with your time. That's absolutely yes. But at the same time, I find myself more busy and working more as an entrepreneur than as an employee. And that's for various reasons. Especially, first, I'm in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I still consider myself a beginner. That's why I still put a lot of pressure on myself. I do want to make more things that I think I could accommodate in 24 hours. And I'm pressuring myself financially as well, right? Like I do want to make things to work out. I don't have a stable paycheck which comes to my bank account anymore, and that's the biggest difference. While you're an employee, while I'm reflecting back, I was like, oh, I have to wake up at 5 a.m. because I have to jump on this call because of the time zone difference. So that was the price I was paying, kind of enjoying Latin America while my team was in Malaysia or Estonia. And but at the same time, I knew that weekends are off. Like I don't have to work on the weekends. I have my certain hours when I have to be on the call, but the rest of the time I can manage and freely explore. So I think freedom is an interesting thing when we talk about remote in general. So as a remote entrepreneur today, I do love my freedom to organize my day, to choose the times I work at. But as an employee, um, I definitely enjoyed the structure and the freedom of not taking big responsibilities and taking less responsibilities, because like company was taking care of so many things I have not thought of when I become entrepreneur, because I have to take care of way more things than I expected. It's not just like beautifully strategizing about your project. It's actually execution day by day in the area where you have no idea how to start. And for me, this is still a question of freedom. I'm exploring for myself, because I do want to come to the balance of being free and being successful and having successful businesses and team members who are working while I can give myself more time to enjoy certain lifestyle. What about you, Nora? What do you say your learning is?
Well, so if I go back to the days when I was an employee, if I compare being an employee to being an entrepreneur, aside from the whole remote work aspect, I think I can agree with you wholeheartedly in that there was a whole bunch of tasks that I had not anticipated. And as an employee, I was ridiculously efficient. I regularly had my work for the day done by like noon, and I was horrified to discover at the last job that I held that instead of being rewarded for my productivity, I instead had to, like you'd think I could at least, I don't mind having to stay at the office, but maybe let me read a book or maybe take a course that will further my career with your organization. And instead they said, no, you can't do that. You have to pretend to be busy. And I got all indignant. I remember this day. I was like, what if my work is done for the day, I should be able to do what I want. Gosh darn it. And that was the ultimate impetus for me to work for myself. And of course, the irony to that statement is, well, when you work for yourself, unfortunately, your work is never done for the day. And I'm a work first, play later sort of girl. So I had to learn the hard way that I had to learn how to start work, and I had to learn how to stop work, and I learned how to choose my tasks. And like you, I was also bamboozled by a bunch of tasks that I hadn't anticipated having to deal with. And I'm curious for you, what were those things that, were beyond the glories of business strategizing and the actual work? What were some of the things that took you by surprise?
Well, lots of administrative work, which I hasn't been doing as a manager of the team, because I had the whole financial department, I had the whole IT department. So like sending invoices, paying for invoices, like managing all the finances, budgeting in a different way rather than budget just one project. So that's something that took me a while to go through. Also, like signing contracts. Like it may sound like quite expected, right? But I didn't know I need to become a proficient in English vocabulary, what lawyers do, because English is not my native language, right? So it was okay. There's so many new words I don't actually know. Let me dig in and like learn how to read all those agreements with certain complications. But yeah, that was something unexpected. Well, quite expected, but I didn't expect it's going to take me so long and so many hours to actually dig into this story. So that's first thing which comes to mind. I'm also reflecting on my role in the company, because I was leading a team of 20 people. And as a manager, I was already exposed to lots of things which I think founders do. Like I was hiring people, I was running interviews, I was running one-on-one meetings with my team members, I was doing strategic sessions, I was doing strategic planning. So it was kind of rehearsal to the entrepreneurship in a way. That's where I felt quite confident to go and try it myself, because like the company gave me this opportunity to train myself without taking unnecessary risks and responsibilities, but also feel that I had this capabilities to manage my own projects.
It's been great that you've been able to translate so many of these skills from being a remote employee into being a remote entrepreneur. And before we move on to the next topic that I'm really excited to talk about, I want to finish off by talking with you a little bit about your entrepreneur, what you've been doing, because you've got a few different businesses that you are in various stages of development with. And of course, the main one that I know about is the Work Travel Summit, and I'm curious to see where that's going, what the future of that is, but also your other businesses. So you have the floor. Tell us what you wish.
Thanks, Nora. So, as you mentioned, Work Travel Summit is the virtual, and I hope that one day it's going to be a physical event where remote workers, remote digital entrepreneurs, and people who are interested in freelancing and living more fulfilling and free lifestyle could gather together again to learn and talk and discuss about the future work, about the future of our lifestyle, and how each of us can craft it on our own terms, considering that the global landscape is shifting, considering that employees and entrepreneurs are getting more flexible with jobs, with hiring, with international exposure. And that was the core idea for me, to explore the idea of like, how does the pandemic change the way we live, we work, and we travel. So that was the essence of the event. And our first event happened in June. It was 4 days. Thanks for being there, Nora, again. It was a huge success, and it gave me a lot of food for thought and exploration where to take this project forward, because it did open up to multiple conversations and multiple directions to how develop it further. I realized that I, as remote entrepreneur myself, struggle a lot with the productivity aspect, and we can talk about it for hours and hours, like, okay, being remote and being solopreneur at some point makes you be quite frustrated with the self-discipline of like not being able to be accountable or hear the feedback on your goals and on your progress. So that's the problem I decided to tackle and challenge for myself and for others who are in a similar shoes. So the next project I'm launching very soon is the program called InFocus. So we are preparing monthly program for entrepreneurs and for freelancers to come together, mastermind together, choose the challenge they want to tackle, and do it together in a flow of different events within 1 month, including different accountability practices, including different research on how we as humans are wired to achieve certain goals.
So it feels to me like InFocus, it was an offshoot of the Work Travel Summit, because part of the Work Travel Summit, of course, were these mastermind groups that, as I understand, were hugely popular, and that I think there were many people who had requested more in-depth mastermind groups along those lines. So is this an extension of that?
Yes, exactly. That's how it happened. So we had a mastermind events within Work Travel Summit, and they were very successful. But the missing element, which we figure out after talking to the participants later on, was that okay, I gained new insights, I gained new strategies, but I'm not really implementing them, or I'm kind of forgetting and writing them down, but maybe not really going for it. That was the missing part, and that's what we want to tackle with this program. Like, first you mastermind, you come up with a great strategy you want to implement and grow your business. Then we give you the set of tools and events to go through within 1 month, including accountability, including certain goal setting and goal planning structure. And we provide you the virtual co-working space where you're actually going to meet with your team members who are not really your team members, but like other like-minded entrepreneurs or freelancers who are struggling with the same issues, who can have very similar to yours experience and can help you tackle those challenges together. And then by the week 3, you already achieve certain goals and you're ready to progress to the next level. So we are aiming to make those plans a reality and actually give the structure of doing things, not just planning and thinking and strategizing, but come together, do this together, and celebrate together in the end. That's the whole idea.
I think that's brilliant, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's easy to attend a summit and to listen to speakers and watch panel discussions, and it's another thing entirely to take everything that you've learned and actually apply it and move forward with it. And one of the advantages of a mastermind group is accountability, because once you do say that you're going to do something, your fellow group members will actually hold you accountable to getting that done, and that is something that is very much lacking in the education in the online education space. So I think that this is a fabulous way to build upon everything that happened in Work Travel Summit. Now, on to what one of the things that one of many things really that I'm really excited to talk to you about is that, when we think of the long-term travel lifestyle as remote workers and digital nomads, the narrative that accompanies that is a very Western-centric narrative. It assumes a passport privilege that comes with having a North American or Western European passport, and that's simply not representative of all the people out there who are remote workers and digital nomads. There are a lot of people who come from countries that have passports that are difficult to travel with, and in fact, actually, I would imagine you're one of these people because you have a Russian passport. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what it has been like to travel full-time with a Russian passport.
Thanks for addressing that, Nora, because you're right. There is this common perception that only people with US European citizenship can afford to do this financially as well as geographically, politically, right? Because so many countries require visas if you are not coming from wealthy, more privileged backgrounds. Well, Russian passport is not the worst one in the world. That's a disclaimer to give. So I can travel to lots of countries thanks to the communism part past of Russia. So like I could travel to most of Southeast Asian countries without passport, without visa, or to Latin America. And I know there are way more countries who cannot even do this, but I've always struggled with visas. That's just a part of my upbringing. Like whenever I needed to travel, I always needed visa. That was normal to me. So it was never like, oh, I didn't know like other way exists, to be honest. So because I was born and raised in exclave of Russia, so for me to even travel to other parts of Russia, I had to cross several countries. So we are situated between Lithuania and Poland, and I'm talking now about Kaliningrad. That's the hometown I'm from, and actually that's where I'm these days visiting my family finally after 2 years. Um, So for me to travel to Europe, I always had to apply for my Schengen visa. For me to go to the US, I have to apply for the visa as well. It could be discouraging because you may feel that you need to have so many visas to go somewhere. But on the bright side, my passport is full of with visa stickers, and some people don't get it. They just go visa stamps. Well, that's just a funny
It's
side to
true.
it. But if I were to give an advice to somebody who thinks that they cannot travel because of the borders or because of the necessity to get visa, like do not let it discourage you because the world is huge. We have like how many countries? I think I like 190 something
193. It all
approved
depends on
by.
your measuring stick. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, about 200 territories are ready to welcome tourists, to welcome visitors. Some of them are more welcoming, some of them less, but nevertheless, there are options. There are countries which will be open to for visits even during the pandemic, and I'm not going to touch on that topic, but during the pandemic I know a lot of people who've been moving around, and I had to move around certain countries because of the visa situation and I couldn't go back to Russia. So definitely try it out, research. And for the past even 2 years during the pandemic, as I said, I was able to stay in Mexico for longer. And Mexican authorities were very understanding. So they could help you to extend your visitor visa, your tourist visa while you are in Mexico, even though, like, I think the limit depends on the country, is like 3 or 6 months. We could easily extend it to longer because we couldn't travel anywhere else. And same, lots of developing countries especially who suffered the most from loss of tourism and closed borders, they are more open now to welcome tourists. And as you know or know, and we discussed it at Work Travel Summit, lots of countries are coming up with an ideas of introducing digital nomad visas. So they do want to see you as a remote worker come in, spend money, live there, enjoy their lifestyle, and do not even pay local taxes or anything. So I think the world is heading to the right direction, and it will help more of people with less privileged passports, including Russians, including other countries, to travel freely and to stay longer in countries that are welcoming remote workers.
That's an excellent point. And actually, in another interview that I did, something similar was expressed in that that people with less privileged passports will have an increased ability to travel with these new digital nomad and remote worker visas that are coming out. So I really truly hope that that is going to be the case. I'm curious if you have any practical tips for traveling with a passport that often requires you to apply for visas. So I'm thinking, practically speaking, okay, you're not in your home country, you're in country B, you want to travel to country C. How do can you apply for the visa in country B, or do you have to go back to your home country? Do you travel with passport photos? Like, what are some practical tips and tricks for being able to make this process easier?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it honestly depends on what passport holder you are. And I don't want to be generalizing because I don't know all the details. But
Sure.
for example, for let's say wealthy country visas, you have to apply. In most of the cases, only from your home country, unless you have residency somewhere else. So in this case, for me, it's Russia. So whenever I go to Russia, and that's exactly the case while I'm in my hometown, I have applied to get my new international passport because my one is about to expire. So always plan ahead to have this buffer time when you need to have your documents ready. And while I'm here, I'm applying for multiple visas because I know that in the next half a year or a year, I don't even have the plan as such, but I always know it's a good idea to have my Schengen visa ready in case I need to fly through Europe or in case I need to go in Europe for a few months or for some events or something. And I'm also going to be applying for my Mexican extended residency. So while I'm here, so I do want to get residency in another country. So this will help me to apply for those wealthy country visas while I'm being in different countries. So I would say it's like a different level of preparation. But if you just plan to travel Make sure you have multiple visas on you, and check in advance where you can go without visa or with like easier visa thing. For example, to Mexico, I should apply to electronic authorization letter to enter the country, which is very easy. You can get it online right away, but just plan in advance. And regarding passports, visas, photos, like it's actually like so natural to me. I always have those visa photos on me just in case I'll need to apply somewhere else, and different copies of my documents. I have like a special folder on my laptop, like which is named by every country I ever applied for a visa in. So if I need to reapply again, I'll just go to this folder and have all my documents ready. So that's maybe another hack for people who always need visas.
No, that's brilliant. Organization is required. Preparation is required to apply for visas in advance. And yes, you're like me as well. I mean, I don't perhaps necessarily need to have all the copies of paperwork that I have, but I have found that it has served me very well to have all of that on hand and to have multiple versions of it and to have backups of it. Because for me, I had my passport stolen when I was in Grenada, the Caribbean island of Grenada, and there wasn't even a Canadian consulate in Grenada. And I had a ticket to travel to Panama in 3 days for a house sitting gig. So it was a horrific event. But
Oh,
if
wow.
I didn't have all the paperwork that I had with me, I wouldn't have been
Mhm.
able to solve the problem. Because for me, I got an emergency pass basically to travel back to Canada without a passport so I could get a rushed passport and then get down to Panama in time for my house sitting gig. So paperwork is important. You never know when you're going to need it.
Yeah, it's always good to have your ID as a copy and travel with this. And if you live in a place, just leave your passport. Don't carry the original passport. Always carry on the copy, because otherwise you can lose it much more
Yeah.
easily.
All right, I want to move on to the final theme of our conversation. When I was doing the Work Travel Summit with you, I had the distinct pleasure of meeting Vlad, who is your partner. And I understand that you two met on the road, I believe, and you have been traveling together. You are of two different nationalities. I just tell me how you met and how you travel and live together as digital nomads.
We did meet on the road because being a part of Mindvalley, we used to organize different international events all around the world in educational and personal growth space. And I was traveling a lot to actually go and co-organize those events. And Vlad was one of the participants. So the first time we met, it was our big event in Barcelona. It was like 400 people. There was like a pilot project for our company, which was very exciting. We met, but just to give a little background, we both speak Russian. So he's a Canadian, I'm Russian, but he has Russian roots. So he was born in Russia and then migrated when he was a kid. So we have this like common language we use sometimes, but we also speak English a lot between two of us. So we met there. We figured out we both speak Russian, but then we kind of went apart because I had my other boyfriend. And the next time we met in Jamaica at another event. We were doing like Wim Hof breathing and like different like in ice bath experiences. But again, like we didn't really notice each other in a way, in a romantic way. And next time we met in Tallinn in Estonia for another event. That's where he invited me to go for dinner, and that's how things started off romantically for us. So that was a long way and different locations where we met. And then I flew to Portugal after that event, and I texted him if he would like to stop by. And he's like, sure, yeah, I'll come in. And he landed in Portugal. And since that moment, it was a little more than 3 years ago, we keep traveling together, keep traveling and keep organizing our projects and keep exploring the same hobby. So that's the short story.
So one of the interesting things, and this is it, when you decide you want to date somebody as a digital nomad, it's kind of like you go from 0 to 100 immediately. Because of course, when you're living and traveling around the world, you meet somebody you like, they're also living and traveling around the world. So, okay, so I've got a ticket to this country. So if we want to keep dating, do you want to come? And suddenly you're living together. Like it's
Well,
the natural progression of a relationship is dramatically accelerated as
exactly. In our case, I think it was even more extreme because we had one date in Estonia and then I was in Portugal. And when he landed there, we thought it's a good idea to rent the same Airbnb. Why would we spend money on two different
Yeah,
places?
of
So
course,
we
right?
literally moved in together on our like second date in a new country in a new place. So it was hilarious. It was weird, it was strange, but it felt right, it felt normal. So even funnier because I had a background in my previous relationship were long distance. So we lived in different countries and we had to travel a lot to see each other. So I went literally from long distance to like no distance. And it was a really interesting beginning of the relationships. But it worked out. So things work.
Well, you generally learn pretty quickly when you're with someone 24/7. You learn pretty quickly whether or not they're going to be a compatible partner. It certainly comes with its own set of challenges as well, of course. But one of the things I always say to people who don't travel full time, if they've met a new partner and they're wanting to know if they're the one, I said travel with them. You'll find out pretty quickly if you guys are compatible if you travel together, because of course you're in foreign environments, you're dealing with stressors you wouldn't have at home, and you're literally on top of one another most of the time. And it's important to set a lot of ground rules like personal space and sometimes taking time to travel apart. And really, I think radical communication is probably imperative. I'm curious if you have any dating advice for long-term travelers and digital nomads.
Yeah, I think that's really great points you raised because 24/7 together could be very tiring even if you love each other and you really enjoy each other companies. Sometimes you do need solo time. So if you are deciding to travel together, like talk about this, choose your solo time routines. For example, now we are taking 1 month solo time, which was like it was like really scary but exciting at the same time because I came to visit my family, he's visiting his family at the moment. So then we're gonna meet in a few weeks somewhere. We don't know yet where. But if we stay 24/7 together and we live and work remotely, both of us, so we have solo Sundays. So Sunday is our solo day. We try to take it apart, like just. I love going to just like reflect, journal in my favorite coffee shop, or just explore something. But like try to limit the interaction. But for those who are not yet dating but traveling a lot, I think the key element to probably meeting somebody you would want to be traveling together is going after communities and events which you think are in the same interest category as you are, because you can meet people, the chemistry can kick in and you'll be like, oh my god, this is amazing, this is the person I want to be with. But then you start exploring, oh okay, maybe we don't really have much in common rather than chemistry. Oh okay, goodbye, so next one. So I think being like looking into the foundational things which can unite you two as two people with certain personalities is the key. So don't be afraid to explore those on first dates, because as you said, Nora, like when you're traveling you don't really have much time, right? Especially if you all go into different places. Like okay, maybe you have like 1-2 weeks in a certain location and then you need to decide if you want to continue traveling together. So I think that definitely accelerates the process of learning about another person. So asking like maybe uncomfortable but straightforward questions on the first dates is going to be my advice, because how else would you know, right? You don't have unlimited time to get to know the person, and you definitely want to filter out those who are won't be compatible with you. So go straight, go deep, and enjoy the process.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly that the best way to meet somebody, especially if you are a digital nomad and have a remote career, and if travel is important to you, then it's important to put yourself in the company of other people who have similar lifestyles. Personally speaking, I can say that that's been a challenge for me all along the way, because I had various relationships in my full-time travel career that were with people who did not share the same lifestyle as me, and that always caused some kind of friction here or there, or it required a level of compromise on my part, or in some cases their part, that caused some real fractures in the relationship. And I've certainly come to now understand, and I guess experience is one of these things. When you date enough people, eventually you start to create your deal breakers. You start to create the foundational requirements that you have in order to know that you're going to have a fulfilling relationship. And that's certainly one of them. And there are plenty of events out there and around the world that connect remote workers and digital nomads. Not the least of which are things like your summit, because there were lots of opportunities. You had a whole section at the Work Travel Summit there were like coffee tables where you could just sit down and chat with people about different things. And I actually met a bunch of really interesting people in those sessions. So there are lots of ways to meet people remotely as well as in person.
Exactly. Virtual networking became a thing during pandemic. We all know that. But I also wanted to bring out the very growing sector of remote workers retreats and nomad camps and whatever you can call them, or co-living houses. So that's becoming a thing. And Vlad and I, we've been doing like co-living houses before the pandemic in different parts of the world, exactly for the same reason. Like two of us were becoming lonely as a couple, so we wanted to surround ourselves with people who are in the same life journey as maybe us, or similar paths. So we were choosing the house, we were choosing the theme for the house, and announcing this to our friends and friends of the friends, and spending like 1-2 months of like deep, reflective, beautiful group gathering in one spot, which always came with storming, Norman, and performing stages, but it was always a positive experience in the end. So I definitely encourage, if you want to travel and if you're a remote worker, go experience co-living houses, co-living retreats, and something similar to that, because that would expand your horizons and will make it much more fun. Have you had experience of similar journeys?
No, actually, I haven't had really any experience with these kinds of events and with co-living houses, but it is absolutely tops on my list of things to do. For exactly that reason, I actually think that I burnt out of this lifestyle. It happened about 12 years in, where I just hit a wall, where I had lost all sense of belonging. I felt like I was constantly trying to reinvent myself in every new place that I went to. I had no cultural context. I didn't have anybody who was kind of along the journey with me who could empathize even with anything that was happening. I had some online friends, but that was, there's something lacking when you don't have the community really of people who share the same lifestyle, who have the same trials and tribulations and victories and challenges. And so from now on, certainly one of the aspects that I am committed to is developing my own community in person, of ways to meet people in person who have similar lifestyles. And co-living is going to be one of the ways that I'll do that. And in fact, actually, I have it on my list to write an article for my website about the various co-living opportunities that there are out there, because there's a lot of different ways and places that you can find these opportunities. And I'm not sure that everyone's aware of them. So that's on my list of things to do.
Exactly. And you did mention a really good idea as well here. So if you don't find a community, or if you don't find a co-living retreat or house you think you would fit, create your own one. Because in this case, like, you could be in a way in charge of who you want to invite or who you want to see around. And it's actually so easy these days to promote it, to just call out to friends and friends of the friends. So if you want to have like a very specialized house of, oh, I want to have a dance house, so I want to gather only dancers who are professionals or who love dancing, like, okay, I'm going to create this. So the world is huge, and there's many beautiful spaces and spots to do it, and it's not that hard even to organize it. So if you really want to have a community around, there's multiple ways to either join one or create one. That's always an option.
That's absolutely true, and that's great advice. I am going to wrap this up because I'm respectful of your time, but is there anything final that you wanted to say, that you wanted to shout from the rooftops about remote work and long-term travel?
Well, I think we're living in a beautiful, beautiful times when so many more opportunities are opening up for any kind of person, any type of ideas you have. And we are just in the beginning of remote work revolution, evolution, whatever we want to call it. So the opportunities are endless. They're truly endless. It's not just like a buzzword, like opportunities are there. So definitely check out, research. There is always a community there who share your interests, who share your ideas and passions, and it's so much easier to travel these days, even though it's a pandemic. Well, it's endemic now, they call it these days, but it's our new normal, and it's here to stay. So it's in our power to take the full advantage of it, and just keep following people who do the same, ask for advice, and the dreams do come true.
I love it. That's perfect. Perfect soundbite. Where can people find you, Victoria?
I think I'm most active on Instagram. So Victoria from Earth, that's my handle. So go go find me. Happy to connect. And if you have any questions, please shoot me the email or write an Instagram or on email victoria@worktravelsummit.com. Very happy to connect and chat to you.
Victoria, this has been a fabulous pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Nora, you're an amazing host, and I love your energy. So thanks for inviting me, and look forward to more episodes.
Thank you so much. I'm Nora Dunn, and I'm otherwise known as the Professional Hobo, and I will catch you next time.